This is All Out Politics, news, debate and opinion from the heart of Westminster. The Welsh Government announced plans this week for 16-year-olds to be given the vote in local elections, and this led to a clash in the Commons as Emily Thornberry for Labour asked David Lidington why 16-year-olds can't vote in England. So should 16 to 18-year-olds get the vote? To discuss that, I'm joined by the writer and journalist Benedict Spence and by the founder and director of the young people's newspaper Shout Out, Matteo Bergamini. So, Matteo, why should they get it?
I think they should, because it's high time that we start to include young people in politics. You know, 16 and 17-year-olds can do a number of other things. And it's a great way for them to get involved in politics. They also have a say, well, they should have a say in our society. It's the way that, it's the best way of getting them to include themselves in our politics and the way our country is run. It gives them a voice, it makes them feel included in our society, and in the end, they're going to inherit this country, so why shouldn't they have a say in how it's run?
Everyone wants to engage young people. Giving them the vote, wouldn't that be the way to do it?
Well, I think it's important, first and foremost. It's an interesting point that you said there, that they're going to inherit this country. But let's actually think about that more broadly. When you stand to inherit something, that doesn't necessarily mean that you get to decide what to do with it right now. I might inherit, I don't know, a car from a relative. It doesn't mean I get to decide where to drive it for the next couple of years, on the off chance that I'll inherit it. Yes, everybody should get the chance to have a say at some point down the line. I think all three of us can agree, that the right to vote is the cornerstone of our society. It's the cornerstone of democracy, of course. It is the most important thing that sets us apart.
It's going to be celebrated next week, the centenary.
Absolutely. No doubt we'll come on to that. But the thing with that is, it carries with it the most responsibility, the most gravitas. And there are things that 16-year-olds cannot do, will not be able to do, even after they get the vote, should they get it, that the political parties who are proposing they get to vote aren't interested in giving to them.
Such as?
Well, for example, they can't smoke, they can't drink, they can't buy fireworks, they can't buy knives, obvious things, but also slightly more ridiculous things. They can't use a tanning bed, they can't get a tattoo. Just yesterday, the Welsh Government passed a law saying that under 18s won't be allowed to get piercings in, quote, intimate places. Now, regardless whether you think that's in good taste or not, what it does betray is an attitude amongst these politicians that these 16-year-olds are capable of making complex decisions on issues that will affect millions of people, but are incapable of making pretty black or white decisions about what to do with their own body.
I mean, there's just going back to your point of inheritance. I mean, you're not affected by that car. You know, it's not something that you're going to end up.
If they crash it, then you wouldn't inherit it, would you?
Of course, but at the moment, while it's not yours, you're not affected by it. At the moment, we're affected by that government. You know, 16 and 17-year-olds are in the educational system. They are affected by how the educational system's run. They're affected by how, you know, when EMA got scrapped or whatever else.
But I mean, isn't it illogical to say, yes, you can have a vote, but you can't have a tattoo or go to a tanning salon? I mean, either people are grown up enough to make their own decisions or they're not.
Well, I think they're grown up to make decisions depending on what that situation is. So a tattoo is something that's permanent. A tattoo is something that's quite trivial in regards to the vote. You know, the vote is something that I think is quite sacred to us all, and it's something that I think gives you a say in our society. You know, we're all talking about getting young people involved in politics. It's something that has eluded us for some time. You know, young people have often voted less than others, and I think quite dramatically is because we don't give them that ability to have that say at a younger age.
I mean, a libertarian might say actually it's wrong to have those restrictions on things like tattoos and tanning, and give them the right to drink, give them the right to...
Well, I will be honest, actually, if somebody can give me a good argument for giving 16-year-olds the right to do all these things, I'm happy to reevaluate my view on whether or not they should have the vote. But you mentioned getting them involved, giving them a voice. Your organisation is involved in going into schools and providing political education, providing literacy for children that actually don't get it at the moment. Now, that's very admirable, but it's not something that happens in all schools. In fact, it happens in a small minority of schools. Children are still not politically literate. Until actually you get them to that stage, I don't think it's necessarily a good idea to give them the vote. For example, you want to go back to the example of the car, you don't give somebody the driver's licence before they start taking lessons. Surely they should get to the end of that process before actually you say to them, all right, now you go out and vote.
You could have that same argument with a 20-year-old, a 30-year-old, a 50-year-old. None of us have ever been educated in politics because it's something that's never really taken part in the educational system. You know, yes, I would love to see political education and political literacy in all schools. And one of the things that we do is deliver political literacy courses in schools to try and make that a reality. But I don't think that should be a prerequisite at the moment to stop young people, 16 and 17-year-olds, from having the vote, because the more young people have a say, the more they feel they have a stake in our society, the more likely the chance that they will start to educate themselves more and therefore take charge of that. When you hit 18, you've got a load of other things going on, and if you've had this void of political engagement up until you hit 18, you're not going to suddenly start engaging. It's only if you have that at a tiered system where at 16 and 17 you can start to have a say, you can start to vote in elections, be it local elections as they're doing in Wales, for example.
That is true, but my point is that right now that education doesn't exist, and there aren't actually any plans to bring it in. And there are two things that one should say about.
Politicians are actually quite afraid of bringing in political education.
Yeah,
I mean, I want to bring on to that point because you both admirably are arguing the principles of this, but isn't the truth when it comes to the politicians who are going to make this decision, giving votes to 16 or 18-year-olds comes down to whether they think it's going to benefit them and their party.
Well, there are three things that I want to say. I'll try to be very quick. The first one is that, yes, I don't actually think that this move is a genuine move to get people more politically motivated. It's because the Labour Party have selected a leader who, for one reason or another, despite going up against possibly the worst Conservative government in living memory, wasn't able to win a general election. But polling suggests is very popular amongst young people, especially young people who cannot currently vote. Ergo, it would make a lot of sense to try to get those people onto the electoral register. But further to that, when you were talking about, getting more people involved, getting more people engaged, and taking control of their situation, if there isn't political education in schools, who are the children, the 16-year-olds, who are going to vote? I'll answer it for you. They're people like me. They're people who come from, frankly, far more privileged backgrounds, who have access to these sorts of things. They're not going to be the ones who simply do not have the resources. So that's unfair. And then the third point, of course, is that do we want to then roll these...
Do we
then want to roll that out into the education system? Of course we do, but...
Are you suspicious of the motives of the politicians for advocating this?
I mean, politicians always have motives behind things. It's the reason why the Conservatives have been courting, you know, the 50+ grey vote for years. You know, they do this all the time to benefit their own gains. There's no surprise there. There's no issue there.
And you think it would benefit Labour?
I mean, you know, young people tend to vote Labour. I don't think there's anything that anyone could deny to suggest otherwise. However, you need to look at the positives that could come out of this. And the fact is that if you start to tier almost like a voting system where you have young people, 16 and 17-year-olds, starting to vote at local elections. We're not talking about general elections, although, frankly, in an ideal world, I'd love to see that happen. But we're talking about local elections where you're starting to give people a taste.
No one votes in council elections.
Well, you're starting to give people a taste in our democracy. And if 16 and 17-year-olds, you know, you saw what happened with the Scottish referendum, for example, where you start to get young people engaged and so forth.
All right, a lot to think about there. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you very much.